morning, everybody. Welcome to That Expert Show. I'm Anna Canzano. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We'll be talking about video games today. I don't know about you, but I remember video games when I was younger. I was totally a Nintendo kid, loved Tetris, was obsessed with Super Mario Brothers, and could play those games for hours on end. But now, I'm a grown-up. I still love those games, but I'm watching the kids around me in my life and maybe the kids in your life as well. They are obsessed with video games in a way that I think maybe is different from what I experienced as a teenager. I don't know. There's something about Fortnite or some of these other games and potentially how they're designed that I want to know more about. And why is it that kids will play these games really almost at the expense of anything else? Their health, homework, eating, going to the bathroom. There's something about it that's a little bit different. So we're going to explore that today with one of the preeminent experts on video games. He's a former vice president of game publishing for Viacom Media Networks, specifically the Nickelodeon Kids and Family Games Group. And under his leadership, Addicting Games, remember that? It was a mobile app. It was launched and it went to #1 in the App Store within just 72 hours. He is also responsible for the adaptation of the popular Nintendo arcade game Donkey Kong. Do you remember that? So he's the guy that turned that arcade game into the at-home version of Donkey Kong 2600 that you might have played on an Atari in the comfort of your own home. And he's now currently the president and CEO of SGK Service Incorporated. Joining us live from the San Francisco Bay Area today is Garry Kitchen. Garry, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. This is really incredible to talk to you because so many of us grew up playing video games and enjoying Donkey Kong. So you have more than 30 years of experience in this field, just absolutely becoming an expert in all things video games. So I was pleased that we were able to book you as a guest and wanted to know from you what your experience was in designing video games and what you think is particular to the design of a game like Fortnite that has kids of this generation so obsessed with it.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that firsthand. I have a nephew who plays quite a lot of Fortnite. It's interesting when you talk about the older games, like, for example, my Donkey Kong adaptation on the Atari. There was a barrier to entry. You had to pay for that game. That game was maybe $30 at retail. One of the reasons that Fortnite is so popular is it's free. Many games today are free. They make money through other ways while you're playing the game. But with a game being free, you can imagine not having to go to retail and buy it, that you're going to get a lot more players playing.
Oh, see, I didn't even know that. Yeah, I didn't know that it was even just free to download it and start playing it.
Well, you hear numbers of like 200 million people, 250 million people playing the game. That's a good 10 times what you would hear from a best-selling game 15 or 20 years ago. Obviously, the other big factor is you can download the game from the comfort of your home. So you're not getting in the car and driving to Toys R Us or, rest in peace, Toys R Us, but Walmart or Target to buy the game. The game is a click away if you have a decent internet connection.
Yeah, ease of access.
Yep. It's also an incredibly fun game. I mean, it is well-tuned. It feels good. For a game player, it's easy to get into. There aren't a lot of barriers to understanding how to play. It's social. I mean, once again, that's the internet. You can play against random people, or you can play with your friends. So that's a big aspect.
So that's interesting to me because we were discussing this. I mean, I was personally obsessed with games like Tetris and Mario Brothers, and later on Minesweeper on my PC, which is so sadly simple. And I was obsessed just playing it against the computer. But I can imagine that social aspect where you're either playing against friends or playing against, people all across the world. That definitely adds a layer of this that draws people in for maybe a longer period of time than is responsible.
Yeah, there's really two factors there. One is it's social, so you can get your friend to play. A lot of people make friends in online games where they'll meet somebody who may live in another state or may live just a few blocks away and really kick up a friendship with them. And it's very exciting. The other equally important piece is games back when you may have been playing games. Any opponents, any elements of the game that you were competing against were controlled by a computer through artificial intelligence, AI. So we would write code that would make the computer make decisions to make you think that you're playing against an opponent. So a
Hmm.
guy running and shooting at you in a war game is doing it with an artificial mind, artificial intelligence. That will never be as good as playing against a human being because a human being is much more clever and will come up with strategies that AI will not. So when you're playing a game like Fortnite against people, it it's much more realistic because you're actually playing against people. You're not playing against simulated people, and that is a dramatic difference in gameplay.
That's interesting. So we have some questions from people who have posted them in advance. They knew I was interviewing a video game expert. Jerry, for example, says that his son, Nathan, is obsessed with Fortnite, and he's watching this show to understand how to curb that obsession. What would be your advice to parents who are dealing with their kids that want to do nothing other than play Fortnite?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of ways to do it. An average Fortnite session is around 20 minutes. So you can talk to your kid and say, okay, one more 20-minute session, and then we're done. It's not like a game where you're in it for hours and you'll get the excuse back of, I can't stop now, I'm in the middle of a level. At the end of a session, that's it. If that sort of cooperative method doesn't work, all of the versions of Fortnite, almost all of them, have parental controls because of the system they're running on. Xbox, PlayStation 4, Switch, even the iPhone, all have parental controls where you can go into settings and say, I want to set a maximum of 2 hours a day. And at that point, yeah, the child can't play anymore. So you can certainly use technology to put a limit on it.
I see. Are there other strategies that you would suggest besides technology? Because I think part of the frustration for parents is just constantly having to have this battle, constantly having to have this conversation with their kids about when they can play, how long they can play, and also that interesting aspect of in-app purchases. Because as you mentioned, Fortnite is free to play, but there are a lot of in-app purchases that can add up for parents.
Well, once again, technology wise, you can block in-app purchases or you can put a maximum amount on them. And you really have to do that because there have been cases of kids not understanding and just spending hundreds or thousands of dollars. I think the most important thing is don't be a stranger to it. Don't look at it as a black box and say, well, I know he plays Fortnite and I don't know what it is. I've never seen it. Sit down with your child and play with them. You don't have to get good at it, but watch them play and talk to them about it. What's the goal? Why are you good? How good have you done with the game? I know
Hmm.
my nephew, who's 8 years old, has won, and winning in Fortnite's pretty hard to do. Uh, Now that may be a good thing, or maybe it's a indication of how much he plays. But in any event, knowledge is power. You learn what the game's about, build up a rapport with your child on playing the game, and I think at that point they'll be more apt to listen to your advice.
Hmm. That is good advice. We have another question from Will, who's watching right now. Will, thanks for joining us. He says that he played games for hours on end growing up. Me too. What truly is an unhealthy amount today for kids? Do you have a take on that?
Well, uh, the 2 hour limit a day is always talked about. Um, I think that's probably a good number. In the summer it may get a little more because they're not in school, but I don't. Even in the summer, I think once you get to 3 or 4 hours, go out and throw a baseball around, play ping pong, do something besides be on a computer or a mobile device.
And this is coming from the guy who helped design the Donkey Kong for the game at home. So you can take this advice with that perspective. You were talking with me earlier when we did the pre-interview about the way games are designed today. And I thought that was fascinating. You were talking about how it used to be that game designers design the game and this is just how the game worked, but there's a much more organic process nowadays to how games like Fortnite and maybe others are developed by the people who are actually playing the game. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's a fascinating phenomena that frankly humbles people like me who consider ourselves game designers. Let's just have an example. One of the biggest genres today, maybe even the biggest, is games called MOBAs, multiplayer online battle arenas. The most well-done ones and the most famous ones are Dota and League of Legends. And these are games where it's 5-on-5 teams playing against each other. So 10 people online playing 5-on-5. Dota was actually a mod. It was a modified version of a game called Warcraft 3, which came from Blizzard. And this was in the 1990s. So a lot of the PC games today, starting back in the 1990s, not only give you the game, but they give you the tools to modify the game because they recognize that people may want to design new levels and put them up and show their friend. Well, Dota was someone's idea for a level. And once they put up this design, the community as a whole modified it, tweaked it, enhanced it, and created a multi-billion-dollar genre of MOBAs. A similar thing has happened with what we call the Battle Royale games, which are Fortnite. There was PUBG before it. There are Rules of Survival is another one. They go all the way back to a mod called DayZ, which was done, I believe, by a soldier who wanted to create a game that he could use in training. So once again, it was an evolution of modding that created a huge genre. It's really amazing.
What would be the number one thing that you think people should know, parents in particular, about Fortnite? I think you had told me, I don't even understand, like the premise of Fortnite is that you're all dropped onto a desert island and you have to figure out a way to survive. It reminds me a little of like Hunger Games or something. Is that the basic premise of the game?
Yes, Hunger Games absolutely comes to mind. There was also a Japanese movie in the early 2000s, I believe, called Battle Royale. And it was 100 people on an island, one person survives. And that's why these are called Battle Royale games, because of that connection. It's 100 people. They are parachute or jump onto an island, land in random places, and they have nothing. They have no weapons. They have no supplies. This is what's called a survival genre. There are a lot of survival games. You land with nothing. You have to go around the island, look for things, get them, and then start eliminating opponents and see if you can be the last one surviving. What I find amazing about it is because it's 100 real people playing, I have never understood the interest in watching people play games. When I thought about esports, 20,000 people go into San Jose Arena to watch somebody play video games. I have to admit, even as an expert, I'm baffled. But when I see people play Battle Royale games like Fortnite, it is very compelling to watch.
Yeah, that's a whole aspect of this as well. Like, I don't understand that. There's so much data being used by kids who are just watching YouTube videos of other people playing. I don't get that at all either. Can you help me understand that? What is the fascination there? Is it trying to watch somebody else play and figure out what they do differently that it betters your game? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's really it's that for sure. It's that for sure. But with Fortnite, it's also that it's like watching a movie. I mean, I have a daughter who's very, very good at those types of games. and she will be playing, and there's only three people left, and then there's two people left, and she's going into a building, and you're afraid there's somebody in the next room, and it is compelling. It is absolutely compelling. So kids, I think, watch YouTube videos incessantly because they're exciting to watch and because they learn techniques. I saw this back when Minecraft came out, well, what, 2009, 2010, when one of my children, my son, would just be obsessed with watching Minecraft videos, and I just didn't get it. But I understand now that it was about, I love the game, I like to see how people are playing it, and I learn things.
Fascinating. I'm going to have to try it because I think unless I try it and immerse myself in it, I don't understand it at all. But I guess I can understand based on what you're explaining why when you're trying to peel a kid away from a game or potentially a video that they're engaged in, it's like ripping them away from, the end of the movie, and you're creating a cliffhanger for them that is impossible for them to overcome, I guess. So I have to ask, when you're at a cocktail party and you have parents come up to you and they figure out that you're the video game guy, do they want to hug you or do they want to slug you?
No, usually they're pretty gracious and they want to know what it's like and how you do it. I remember when I was, back, I started in the late 70s and 80s, and there really very few people were game designers. And I remember I was at some event and somebody asked what I did, and I said I made video games, and their response to me was, I thought those were just made by computers. So much for creativity.
Right. Oh yeah, computers just do that.
They
Not
just
human
make them.
innovation. No, no, no.
Right.
So, last question. Where do you see this all going? I mean, what's on the horizon? If you can peer into the future, into your crystal ball, where is the future headed as far as video games and how they're evolving now?
Well, I think a great answer to that is to see the movie Ready Player One. I read the book. Steven Spielberg did the film. It came out 6 months or a year ago. And I think it's incredibly accurate to where it's going. Virtual reality takes a video game player, puts them into an environment where they can turn around 360 degrees. They can use their hands. They can pick up items. And Ready Player One shows a society maybe 20 or 30 years from now where people spend an incredible amount of time inside a virtual world rather than inside the real world, because they can look any way they want. They can be anybody they want. They can be whatever gender they want. They can fly. They can do anything you can do in a video game, and it feels real. And I'm not saying that's great, but in 20 or 30 years, that's going to be very possible.
So the virtual reality thing, that's going to be a thing because I've seen it pop up. It's a popular, Christmas gift, but I'm not seeing a massive buy-in. Like I'm not seeing all these kids really buying into it. I just see kids still playing the normal Xbox or whatever PlayStation consoles at home, looking at a regular TV monitor.
Yeah, virtual reality isn't really there yet. Facebook is really focused on it with their Oculus brand, but there's a tipping point where the technology becomes cost effective and the price gets under $200. And then you'll start to see consumer acceptance. They have a unit that's under $200, but in my estimation, it's not good enough yet.
Mm-hmm.
I have it. The resolution is not great. It needs help, and it needs the technology to continue to improve, which it does. Technology always improves and gets cheaper. There are other problems with virtual reality. In its current form, some games require you to wear this thing over your eyes where you can't see, and yet you have the urge to walk. That doesn't work. You're going to trip over the dog. You're going to fall over the sofa. So there are some design elements of virtual reality that aren't there yet, but it's coming.
Oh, I don't see why that would be problematic at all. Yes, I've always wondered that. Like, if you're so immersed in your virtual reality world, the real world is still going on around you. So
yeah, there's nothing you can do about that.
I have seen Ready Player One, and I have to say, if that's the future, I'm not sure that I'm ready for it because it was kind of a depressing um, depiction of what the future would be. I like the real world quite a bit better. I know I said last question, but we have some more questions from social media. So if you want to stay with
Sure,
us,
no problem. I love them.
um, there's a question on Facebook about Fortnite being a competitive game versus a violent game. And this is apparently a conversation that goes on potentially in households between husband and wife. It's just competition, it's not violent. Where do you side with that?
Well, you'll notice if you look at Fortnite and you compare it to other what we call first-person shooters, FPS games. If you compare it to a game like Call of Duty or other more military-style games, it is not violent. I mean, Fortnite is aged down, both graphically and gameplay wise. It has a lot of fantasy in it. It's very cartoony. It's aged down for a broader market, and that's why they were able to do the numbers they're doing.
Mm.
Uh, Someone, maybe an adult, who wants to play something more realistic, they'll go to a game that is certainly much more realistic and in some ways much more violent and bloody. Uh, that's not what Fortnite is. Fortnite is competition. Fortnite is it's amazing how you can learn strategy. It's amazing how you can learn problem solving. There's a lot of amazing brain exercises that go on in trying to figure out how to defeat 100 people at a task.
Hmm.
And Epic Games has done it very well in a nonviolent way.
Well, while we're on the topic of violent games, then, we ran into this issue with the teenagers in our home. It's like, okay, so there's a certain age recommendation or restriction on a game that we would be told by the teenagers, well, that's not realistic. I mean, that says, that it should be played by someone 12 and up, but I'm only 11 and I can totally handle it. I can do first person shooter game. I and again, this is an area that I just didn't know enough about. I know that I listen to media, and if you listen to a lot of media reports, you would say that there's arguments on either side on the violent tendencies that a first-person shooter game can inspire in an impressionable 11 or 12-year-old boy. So can you talk with us a little bit about that and your take? And I know there's opinions on all ends of the spectrum on this.
Yeah, well, the most important opinion is believe the age ratings. Uh, if your child tries to say, no, 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 they don't apply to me, I wouldn't buy that. Those age ratings make a lot of sense. If a game is mature, 17 and over, then, in my opinion, a young kid shouldn't be playing it. What amazes me is I will go to someone's house or I will talk to my friends, and somebody will say, well, my 11-year-old is playing Grand Theft Auto. Well, they shouldn't be playing Grand Theft Auto. And the parent, it's what I said before. It's the advice of, don't live in a box and not know what's going on. If they ask for a game, 10 minutes of research can tell you everything you need to know about, is the game appropriate? There's actually a very good website called Common Sense Media,
Yes.
which is a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go on there and they will tell you all you need to know about, is this game or movie or TV show appropriate for an age? And I've used it a lot because it's my wife is very sensitive to violence.
Mm-hmm.
So before I'm going to put on a movie and have her walk out of the room, I'll go to a site like Common Sense Media and read a little bit and say, no, this isn't for you. And you've got to do that with media.
Oh, see, now that makes you a really good husband. That would speak to the fact that you're still married. That's very very wise.
Yeah. I've made the mistake a couple of times. I won't make it again.
Good for you. Okay, I have one more question, and I don't know if this is a real question or from just some kind of video game insider that is intended to make this as a joke, but Steve wants to know whether E.T. was the worst game ever invented.
That is a great question. I love that question. I know the designer of that game, Howard Scott Warshaw. who is a wonderful man and a brilliant designer. And in the industry, we've talked about this a lot. You can only do so much in a certain amount of time. Uh, Donkey Kong probably took me 4 months, and that was 100 hours a week.
Wow.
An average game on the Atari took 6 to 8 months to make when we were at Activision. Howard had 5 weeks to do that game. And we all agree that is the best 5-week game that was ever done. Is it a great game? No. But Howard, as Howard would say, he did Yar's Revenge, which was an acclaimed game on the Atari. It did really, really well, lots of units. And he also did E.T., which is at the other side of the spectrum. So he says that shows his breadth as a designer, because he can do the entire spectrum of quality of games. And I agree with Howard. And, given the limitations, he did what he could, and he did a great job.
Fantastic. Wow. I love that insider information. See, we ask you, and you know the designer of that game. Fantastic.
Well,
Thank
that
you
was a great
so
question.
much.
Obviously, someone in the know.
Someone in the know. Yeah. See, we get viewers of all kinds on that expert show.
Yep.
Garry, thank you so much for your expertise, and thank you for sharing your wealth of information with us. This is why I love this show, because you know your stuff, and we benefit from it. So really appreciate
Anna,
your time.
thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And thank
Take
you
care
for
now.
watching That Expert Show. Everybody, appreciate you tuning in for this episode and contributing your great questions. Just a reminder, you can always connect with us. Send us your questions and your show topic ideas via our various social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. You can tweet me directly, Anna_Canzano, or find me on Facebook, where you may be watching this live. We're also on Instagram as That Expert Show. And remember, you can always catch this after the fact. I know sometimes it's hard to watch things live, so we always post this show after the fact on YouTube, and we put it out as well as a podcast on the various podcast platforms, whether it's Google Play or iTunes. You can find That Expert Show to listen to as you're going about your busy day. You can also check out our website as well, thatexpertshow.com. You can always go back and watch previous episodes there and get more information about our guests. And, just really grateful that you are along for this journey, and would love your feedback. If you've got any ideas for this show, send them to me, reach out to me directly, and I will communicate with you. That's it for this episode of That Expert Show, where you help run the show. See you next time.